It's 20 minutes after the hour, 3 o'clock, and you are watching the Saturday edition of Today. 4 Cape independence parties have signed a memorandum of understanding to advance their plans for an independent Western Cape. They cite the failures of the Government of National Unity in producing economic growth, combating crime, and reducing unemployment as reasons for their desire for autonomy. Now, the group says that Cape independence must improve the lives of Western Cape citizens. I'm joined by Referendum Party leader Phil Craig, joining us from Cape Town, and African Transformation Movement leader Vuyo Zungula is live in studio. To both gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Phil, let's just start with you. In terms of this MOU, and how further, in your understanding, does this bring you closer to your desire of an independent Western Cape?
Yeah, thank you, Cindy, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. Look, it brings us significantly closer. I think everyone understands there's been a waiting game. I think South Africa is a country that's in crisis. Many people thought that the GNU was a solution that could address these issues. Let's address the other key issues: economic growth, joblessness or unemployment, and crime. It's now quite clear that there are no solutions at a national level for South Africa. These problems are going to move forward, and I think that really is really a good catalyst for us now to move forward and to consult the Western Cape people democratically in a referendum, and to see whether they wish, in fact, to pursue this solution of Cape independence, which polling has consistently shown the majority are in favour of holding a referendum, and that the majority believe it would improve the quality of their lives and would address unemployment, economic growth, and reduce crime.
Mr. Zungula is also a member of Parliament and a leader of the ATM party. And just to explain from a process that a potential Western Cape or independent Western Cape is likely to take, there probably is going to be consultation required, amendments or white paper, etc. How does it then materialize if we were to jump the gun and get to that conclusion?
It's not going to materialize, firstly, because Philip Craig is not a South African citizen. He's a permanent resident of the country. And in any self-respecting country, he should have been deported because he's sowing divisions in the country. And it's funny how he comes all the way from Britain to come and try and divide South Africa, want to impose his political ideas on what South Africa should be, undermining the will of native South Africans who in the Western Cape have never said they want to be separated from our country. And the other issue here is that even the polls that he's talking about, those polls will never be from people from Ekhayelitsha, Egugulethu, and all of the townships, including Manenberg. It will be people who are in the affluent areas of Cape Town, people who have citizenship by colonization. So in our view, this is a misplaced call. Instead, we want to encourage Mr. Philip Craig to go back to Britain and solve the issues of Britain. You don't find South Africans wanting to impose their own ideas on what Britain should be, so he must learn to respect South Africa.
And Philip, you are on record having answered. I know that particularly on social media, there's been backlash around the idea of an independent Western Cape. But just clarify, you say that you have legal status and the Constitution also provides for you to then pursue this particular agenda.
Yeah, look, absolutely. So we mustn't get sidetracked in people's political agenda, and a lot of things that Vuyo said there are absolute nonsense, but they're not even worth commenting on. The point is that all people have a right to self-determination. That's in the South African Constitution, Section 235. It's in international charters of international law that South Africa has signed. The Western Cape people exist. They're established in the Constitution, and the right to hold referendums is established in the Constitution. And this whole notion of who we ask and who we don't ask is crazy. And I think perhaps Vuyo misunderstands what a referendum is. A referendum is asking every single person in the Western Cape, every registered voter, whether or not they wish Cape independence to happen or they wish to remain a part of South Africa. So this is purely a democratic and peaceful process as envisaged in international law, as allowed for in the South African Constitution, and it's purely democratic. It's got nothing to do with I or any other individual want. Yeah, there are 3.2 million registered voters in the Western Cape, and it's about asking those 3.2 million people and abiding by the will of the majority of those people, because we have to recognise that those people, for 31 years, the majority have never voted for the ANC government. They've never been governed according to their democratic will. So these things that are happening to them, this lack of growth, this high unemployment, and this chronic crime, are problems that are being inflicted upon them by voters of the rest of South Africa, because they voted for a different government to the government that we've got. So what does Cape Independence do? It puts the Western Cape people democratically in control of their own destiny, allows them to have a solution to these problems, which South Africa hasn't got a solution to, and it's democratic.
All right, just in the interest of time, Philip, just break it down. So if you're saying that the problems that the Western Cape is experiencing is largely because you have to vote at a national level, provincial, local level. So are you proposing there's going to be a different political landscape or configuration in the Western Cape if, and Vuyo hears of the idea that it will never happen, the Western Cape independence is granted?
Look, absolutely. And very simplistically, the Western Cape currently has a provincial parliament. And that provincial parliament will become the national parliament. And actually, rather than that provincial parliament having to carry out the policies that are voted for in the national parliament, it'll carry out the policies it votes for itself in the provincial parliament. And that, of course, is exactly what independence means. It just allows the Western Cape people to make their own decisions, as opposed to, because bear in mind that the Western Cape people make up about 12% of the population of South Africa. So they're always going to be outvoted by people of the rest of South Africa. So Cape independence is the only way that they are allowed or able to be able to vote.
Let's get Vuyo to respond. Sorry for go ahead, please, Vuyo. If you just, particularly when it comes to what the Constitution says, you did say about his legitimacy, number one, as a citizen, or he's got legal standing, whichever that is, it does not preclude one from aspiring or acting in a particular way for self-preservation or whatever reason. The Constitution does allow for all who lives in South Africa to express themselves. So what's your response to the arguments that, they need to break away from the national agenda?
Look, what they're wanting to do, it is to effectively break South Africa. There's going to be a new country in their view that will be the Cape Independence or whatever. And they are quoting Section 235 of the Constitution. The first issue that you are citing as a problem, it is his locus standi, because he's not a citizen, he's a permanent resident of a country. He's got citizenship of Britain. And any respecting country should have long deported him and go back to his native Britain. The second thing here is that he's sowing divisions in our country, and clearly he's working with the DA, because he's citing that the voters have voted for another party, they did not vote for the ANC. He is refusing to accept that currently in the Western Cape and Cape Town, it is the DA that is in charge. So he's trying to paint all of the weaknesses and bad governance of the DA to the ANC government, whereas he should have been holding the DA accountable. And lastly, what we are saying as a party, that firstly, we need to confront the problems that we face in South Africa, work to collectively in all 9 provinces, make the country work for all citizens, not have a case whereby you've got people that are coming from other countries wanting to impose themselves on the affairs of South Africa. That is why you've got the likes of Helen Zille, who are going to say people coming from the Eastern Cape are actually refugees. It is that colonial mentality that seeks to undermine black people, especially in the Western Cape. So what he's trying to drive here, firstly, it is a wedge between the whites in Western Cape against even the blacks that are also in Western Cape, and also the country, which is South Africa, to see Western Cape and Cape Town as a separate entity, of which I want to say it's not going to happen. There is no way in which South African citizens must accept a new type of colonization whereby foreigners are going to come from Britain and want to take away pieces of land like they want to do with Western Cape, just like they did since 1652. All
right, Philip, Phil, sorry, your response just, I suppose, in how this is going to benefit the Western Cape citizens. We know there are challenges by its own admission that the high levels of murder and crime in the Cape Flats, Mitchell's Plain, and Gugulethu, etc., are areas that have largely been neglected and not necessarily provided for. How is this going to work under a so-called independent Western Cape?
Well, so we can look at the hard data. We've got the data. Let's look, for example, at what the DA said in the GNU when they went in with the ANC. They said we're only in the GNU because we want to deliver economic growth and jobs. Well, the GNU is delivering neither, and the Western Cape has the highest murder rate in the world. Now, the Western Cape government has repeatedly asked for control of its own policing, but the national government and the Western Cape people have voted for that twice in elections. They've voted for a manifesto that include taking control of policing in the Western Cape. But the national government habitually refuses to allow policing. So we've got the worst crime, worst murder rate in the world in the Western Cape, and we've got the national government literally stopping the Western Cape from tackling that problem in the way that it wants to tackle it, even though the Western Cape people have voted for that solution. And it's all sorts of these issues. So what will happen is in an independent Western Cape, there will be far lower unemployment, far higher economic growth, far lower crime, and everybody will have a far better and higher standard of living because we'll be governed according to sensible economic policies, and we'll be better governed than we are in South Africa, and that will lead to a better life for all the people of the Western Cape, of all races.
I want to talk about the international interest in what and the DA have called for the Western Cape, saying that the US is on board, Europe, etc. And we understand the legacy of colonialism and the settlers coming in, why that would be an allegiance. But how problematic is that for you? Just in the interest of time, briefly, what are the blind spots or potential threat to sovereignty and unity in the country?
They are clearly undermining South African citizens, especially the native citizens, because if they are going to be talking about the US, Britain being in support of Cape independence, but they're not talking to people from Khayelitsha, they're not talking to people from Enyanga, Egugulethu. And what's clearly problematic, even now, you've got the so-called digital nomads who are clearly pushing away native South Africans or the new middle class from entering into some spaces because they're increasing their rent prices and prices of amenities. So this is part of a bigger ploy to actually move the Cape and the Western Cape away from native South Africans. That is why they're making it very difficult for native South Africans, firstly, to afford living in Cape Town and also to exist in Cape Town. So in that regard, from our side, he must just go back to Britain and let the people of South Africa, especially the native people who reside at Khayelitsha, Enyanga, Egugulethu, determine their future as espoused in Section 235 of the Constitution.
Very briefly, just to wrap up, Phil, do you concede, accept that the Western Cape idea, vision, dream may not materialize?
Well, of course I accept that. I mean, we're calling for a referendum to allow the Western Cape people to make their choice. I believe that they will vote for Cape independence, and we're going to organise that referendum ourselves, so there will be a referendum. So I do believe that will happen. But it's interesting, Vuyo's stuck in the past. It's fascinating for him. He's not got past this race. He's talking about natives and different colours, and he keeps inferring that, of course, we're talking to all the people of the Western Cape. And here we are, we're talking about the Western Cape people in all of their diversity. We want to get away from non-racialism, and there's constant reference to race, and Vuyo's stuck in the past. And the frightening thing is he hasn't even mentioned the so-called coloured people, who are the largest ethnic group in the Western Cape, and ironically, in our part of the world, they are the indigenous people. So it's just nonsensical. But we're talking about all of the Western Cape people, and Vuyo needs to catch a wake up. We're past apartheid now. It's about creating jobs and a better life for all the people of the Western Cape, whatever colour they are.
Yeah, and I know, Vuyo, you're itching to respond, but we literally are out of time. I need to thank you both, and hopefully we'll have another opportunity to engage. That is Phil Craig, a co-founder of Cape Independence Advocacy Group and leader of the Referendum Party. Vuyo Zungula is the African Transformation Movement leader, joining us in studio. Share your thoughts on the independence of the Western Cape on our social media platforms. Let's recap our top stories this half hour.